Maya Rodriguez pulled her old Honda into the student parking lot of Riverside High School, her hands gripping the steering wheel tighter than necessary. Through the windshield, she could see clusters of students hanging around the entrance, their designer backpacks and perfectly styled hair making her feel even more out of place. This was her 7th school in 4 years, thanks to her father's military assignments, but somehow this one felt different. Maybe it was because she knew this would be her last move before graduation, or maybe it was because she was tired of always being the outsider. She checked her reflection in the rearview mirror one more time. Her long black hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she wore a plain gray hoodie with dark jeans. Nothing flashy, nothing that would draw attention. That was the goal: blend in, survive the year, graduate, and move on with her life. The morning air was crisp as Maya stepped out of her car, slinging her worn backpack over her shoulder. The chatter of students filled the courtyard, but she kept her eyes down, focusing on the cracked concrete beneath her feet. She'd learned long ago that eye contact on the first day was like painting a target on your back. "Excuse me, are you lost?" The voice was saccharine sweet, but Maya could hear the underlying mockery. She looked up to see 3 girls standing in front of her, blocking her path to the main building. The leader was a tall blonde with perfectly applied makeup and clothes that probably cost more than Maya's monthly food budget. Her 2 followers flanked her like bodyguards, their arms crossed and expressions hostile. "I'm looking for the main office," Maya said quietly, her voice steady despite the familiar knot forming in her stomach. "Oh, you're the new girl," the blonde said, looking Maya up and down with obvious distaste. "I'm Jessica Chen, and this is my school. Let me give you some free advice: there's a hierarchy here, and you're definitely at the bottom." Maya had heard variations of this speech at every school she'd attended. The popular girls establishing dominance, marking their territory like pack animals. She'd learned that the best response was usually silence and submission. Keep your head down, don't fight back, and eventually they'd get bored and move on to easier targets. "Thanks for the advice," Maya said, trying to step around them. Jessica moved to block her again. "I wasn't finished. See, we have certain standards here at Riverside. And, looking at you." She gestured dismissively at Maya's outfit. "You clearly don't meet them. That hoodie looks like it came from a thrift store, and those jeans have seen better days. Are you poor or just have no taste?" The other students in the courtyard had started to notice the confrontation. Maya could feel their eyes on her, some curious, others hungry for drama. A few pulled out their phones, no doubt ready to record whatever happened next for social media entertainment. "I just want to go to class," Maya said, her voice still calm but with an edge that Jessica didn't catch. "And you will, after we establish some ground rules. First, you don't talk to any of the popular guys. They're off limits to girls like you. Second, you sit in the back of the cafeteria, not anywhere near our table. Third, you don't participate in any clubs or activities that we're involved in. Basically, you stay invisible and out of our way." Maya's jaw tightened slightly. She thought about her father, Staff Sergeant Miguel Rodriguez, and the lessons he'd taught her about standing up to bullies. But she also thought about her promise to her mother to avoid trouble at this school. Her mom had been so tired lately, working double shifts at the hospital while dealing with Maya's dad being deployed overseas again. The last thing she wanted was to add school problems to her mother's stress. "Fine," Maya said, though the word tasted bitter in her mouth. Jessica smiled triumphantly. "Smart girl. Now, one more thing. Tomorrow is the annual charity fashion show, and we need someone to help with setup and cleanup." "Congratulations, you just volunteered." "I didn't volunteer for anything," Maya replied, a spark of defiance flickering in her dark eyes. "Oh, but you did. See, this is how things work here. The popular kids organize events, and the nobodies help make them happen. It's the natural order of things." Jessica stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper that only Maya could hear. "And if you don't show up, things are going to get very difficult for you here. Trust me, you don't want that." The warning was clear, and Maya recognized the familiar pattern. Give in now, or face escalating harassment for the rest of the school year. She'd seen it happen to other kids, watched as they became isolated and miserable, counting down the days until graduation like prisoners marking time. "I'll think about it," Maya said finally. "You'll do more than think about it. You'll be in the gymnasium at 6 a.m. sharp tomorrow morning. And wear something better than that raggedy outfit." Jessica turned to her friends. "Come on, girls. We've wasted enough time on charity work for one day." As the three girls walked away, laughing and whispering among themselves, Maya stood frozen in place. Around her, the crowd began to disperse, but she could still feel the stares and hear the whispered comments. The familiar feeling of being an outsider settled over her like a heavy blanket. She made her way to the main office, where a kindly secretary gave her a schedule and a map of the school. The building was larger than most she'd attended, with long corridors lined with lockers and classroom doors. Students moved between classes in organized chaos, their conversations creating a constant background hum. Maya's first class was advanced biology with Mr. Patterson, a balding man in his 50s who seemed genuinely enthusiastic about cellular respiration. She found an empty seat near the back and tried to focus on the lesson, but her mind kept drifting to the confrontation in the courtyard. During lunch, she sat alone at a table near the windows, watching the social dynamics play out across the cafeteria. Jessica and her crew held court at a central table, surrounded by other popular students who hung on their every word. The athletes sat together at another cluster of tables, their Letterman jackets and confident postures marking their territory. Various other groups had staked out their own areas: the theater kids, the gamers, the academic achievers. Maya opened her brown bag lunch, another reminder of how different she was from the students buying meals from the well-stocked cafeteria. Her sandwich was simple, peanut butter and jelly on store-brand bread, but it filled her stomach and that's all that mattered. "Mind if I sit here?" The voice startled Maya from her observations. She looked up to see a girl about her age with curly red hair and freckles across her nose. Unlike most students, she wasn't dressed in expensive clothes, though her outfit was neat and clean. "Sure," Maya said, gesturing to the empty chair across from her. The girl sat down and unpacked her own brown bag lunch. "I'm Sarah Martinez. I saw what happened this morning with Jessica and her crew. That was rough." "Maya Rodriguez. And, yeah, it was pretty typical new girl hazing, I guess. Typical for Jessica, maybe, but not typical for decent human beings." Sarah unwrapped a sandwich that looked homemade. She's been the self-appointed queen of this school since freshman year. Her dad owns half the businesses in town, so she thinks she can treat everyone like employees. Maya appreciated Sarah's straightforwardness. "Thanks for the warning. I've dealt with girls like her before." "Have you?" "Because most kids who cross Jessica end up having a really miserable time here. She's got a long memory and a creative imagination when it comes to making people's lives difficult." "What do you mean?" Sarah glanced around to make sure no one was listening, then leaned forward slightly. "Last year, there was this girl named Emma who accidentally spilled juice on Jessica's designer purse. It was clearly an accident. Emma was carrying too many books and tripped. But Jessica made it her mission to destroy Emma's social life. She started rumors, got Emma excluded from group projects, even convinced some teachers that Emma was cheating on tests." "What happened to Emma?" "She transferred schools halfway through the year. Her parents said it was for academic opportunities, but everyone knew the real reason." Sarah took a bite of her sandwich before continuing. "The thing is, Jessica's not just mean, she's smart about it. She never does anything that can be directly traced back to her. She gets other people to do her dirty work, or she creates situations where her targets look like the aggressors." Maya processed this information while finishing her sandwich. She'd encountered sophisticated bullies before, but usually they were more direct in their approaches. Jessica sounded like she operated on a different level entirely. "Why are you telling me this?" Maya asked. Sarah shrugged. "Because you seem nice, and because I know what it's like to be on Jessica's bad side. I was there freshman year when I accidentally sat at what she considered her table. I learned quickly to stay out of her way." The rest of the lunch period passed quietly, with Sarah pointing out various social groups and explaining the unwritten rules of Riverside High. Maya found herself grateful for the information, even though it painted a picture of a school more socially complex and potentially hostile than she'd hoped. Her afternoon classes went smoothly enough. In English literature, they were starting a unit on classic American novels. In history, Mr. Thompson was passionate about World War II battles, which reminded Maya of her father's stories about military strategy. In chemistry, she found herself paired with a quiet boy named David who seemed more interested in his calculator than conversation. The final bell rang at 3:15, and Maya made her way back to the parking lot. The courtyard was filled with students heading to various after-school activities or catching buses home. She spotted Jessica near the flagpole, surrounded by her usual entourage and several football players. As Maya walked toward her car, she heard footsteps behind her. She turned to see one of Jessica's friends, a brunette named Brittany who'd been silent during the morning confrontation. "Hey, new girl," Brittany called out. "Jessica wanted me to remind you about tomorrow morning. 6 a.m. in the gym. Don't be late." "And, what if I am?" Maya asked, curiosity overriding caution. Brittany smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Let's just say Jessica has a very good memory, and she holds grudges for a long time. You seem like a smart girl. I'm sure you'll make the right choice." After Brittany walked away, Maya sat in her car for a few minutes before starting the engine. Through the windshield, she watched the social dynamics continue to play out. Groups of friends making plans, couples walking hand in hand, students rushing to various activities and practices. The drive home took her through the older part of town, where the houses were smaller and the yards less manicured. Her family's rental house was a modest two-bedroom with a small front porch and a chain-link fence. It was temporary housing, like all their homes had been, but her mother had tried to make it feel welcoming with plants and colorful curtains. Inside, Maya found a note from her mom explaining that she'd picked up an extra shift at the hospital and wouldn't be home until late. The house felt quiet and empty, the way it always did when her father was deployed and her mother was working. Maya heated up leftover pizza and sat at the small kitchen table to work on homework. As she read about cellular mitosis and solved chemistry equations, her mind kept returning to the events of the day. The familiar pattern was already beginning: establish dominance, create fear, maintain control through subtle threats and social manipulation. She thought about her father's voice on their last phone call from overseas. "Remember, Mija, bullies only have power if you give it to them. Sometimes the best way to deal with a problem is to face it head-on." But he'd also taught her about choosing battles wisely and understanding when retreat was the better part of valor. The evening passed slowly. Maya finished her homework, watched some television, and tried to call her father, but his unit was on a mission and communication was limited. The silence of the house felt heavier than usual, and she found herself missing the constant background noise of military bases where there was always activity and people around. Before bed, she stood in front of her bedroom mirror and looked at her reflection. Her father had taught her many things over the years: how to defend herself, how to stay calm under pressure, how to read people and situations for potential threats. But he'd also taught her about restraint, about not revealing capabilities unless absolutely necessary. The girl looking back at her in the mirror appeared ordinary enough. Average height, athletic but not obviously so, with intelligent dark eyes that had seen more schools and social situations than most teenagers. What the mirror didn't show was the discipline learned through years of martial arts training, the conditioning from morning runs with her father when he was home, or the mental toughness developed from constantly adapting to new environments. Maya had learned to hide these aspects of herself, to appear vulnerable and unremarkable. It was easier to blend in when people underestimated you, when they saw only what they expected to see based on stereotypes and assumptions. As she prepared for bed, Maya made a decision about tomorrow morning. She would go to the gymnasium at 6 a.m., not because Jessica had demanded it, but because she wanted to understand exactly what kind of person she was dealing with. Knowledge was power, and she needed to know her enemy before deciding how to proceed. The night was restless, filled with dreams of previous schools and faces of bullies she'd encountered over the years. In some dreams, she fought back and won. In others, she endured and survived. But, in all of them, she was alone, facing challenges without backup or support. When her alarm clock rang at 5:30 a.m., Maya was already awake, staring at the ceiling and thinking about the day ahead. She dressed in the same style as yesterday, simple, unremarkable clothes that wouldn't draw attention or give Jessica additional ammunition for mockery. The drive to school in the pre-dawn darkness was peaceful, with empty streets and the gradual lightening of the sky. Maya parked near the gymnasium and sat in her car for a few minutes, watching the building and thinking about her approach to the situation. At exactly 6 a.m., she walked through the gymnasium doors, ready to face whatever Jessica had planned. The large space was dimly lit, with rows of folding chairs stacked against the walls and a small stage area set up at one end. Maya could hear voices coming from a storage room adjacent to the main gym. "Well, look who decided to show up," Jessica's voice echoed across the empty space as she emerged from the storage room, followed by Brittany and another girl named Amanda. "I wasn't sure you had the backbone to actually come." Maya remained silent, waiting to see what would unfold. The early morning light streaming through the high windows created long shadows across the polished floor, and the empty gymnasium felt cavernous and isolated. "Since you're here, you might as well make yourself useful," Jessica continued. "We need all these chairs set up in rows, the stage decorated with flowers and banners, and the sound system tested. Think you can handle that without screwing it up?" "Probably," Maya replied evenly. Jessica's eyes narrowed slightly at the casual response. She was clearly expecting more deference, more obvious submission. "Probably isn't good enough. This event is important to the school and to my family's reputation. If you mess anything up, there will be consequences." "What kind of consequences?" The question seemed to catch Jessica off guard. Most students didn't ask for clarification when she made threats, they simply accepted them and complied. "The kind that make your life here very unpleasant." "Trust me, you don't want to find out." Maya nodded and moved toward the stack of chairs, beginning the process of setting them up in organized rows. The work was physical but not difficult, and she found the repetitive motion almost meditative. Behind her, she could hear Jessica and her friends discussing plans for the fashion show, their voices carrying the assumption that Maya was no longer worth their attention. As the morning progressed, other students began arriving to help with setup. Most of them were underclassmen who seemed nervous around Jessica, jumping to follow her increasingly detailed and demanding instructions. Maya watched the dynamics, noting how Jessica used her voice, body language, and social position to maintain control over the group. The work continued for 2 hours, with Maya assigned the most physical tasks while Jessica's friends handled the more visible and creative aspects of the setup. By 8 a.m., the gymnasium had been transformed into an elegant venue for the evening's fashion show, with proper lighting, decorated stage, and neat rows of chairs facing the runway. "Not bad for a charity case," Jessica said, looking around the completed setup. "Maybe you're not completely useless after all." Maya finished stacking the extra chairs and wiped her hands on her jeans. "Anything else you need?" "As a matter of fact, yes. Tonight during the show, we'll need someone to handle coat check and program distribution. Another volunteer opportunity for you." "I didn't volunteer for this morning, and I'm not volunteering for tonight." The words hung in the air like a challenge. Jessica's expression shifted from casual superiority to something harder and more dangerous. Around them, the other students stopped their conversations and turned to watch the confrontation. "Excuse me?" Jessica's voice was quiet but carried an unmistakable threat. "I helped this morning because I wanted to see what this was about." "Now I know. But I'm not your personal servant, and I'm not going to be bullied into doing whatever you want." Maya could see the calculation happening behind Jessica's eyes. This wasn't going according to the usual script, and Jessica was clearly trying to decide how to regain control of the situation. "You have no idea what you just did," Jessica said finally, her voice carrying absolute certainty. "No idea at all." The rest of Maya's school day passed in an eerie calm that reminded her of the silence before thunderstorms. Students who had witnessed the gymnasium confrontation kept glancing at her in the hallways, some with curiosity, others with what looked like pity. Word traveled fast in high school ecosystems, and, by lunchtime, everyone seemed to know that the new girl had openly defied Jessica Chen. Sarah found Maya at their usual table near the windows, sliding into the seat across from her with a worried expression. "Are you completely insane?" she whispered, leaning forward. "People are saying you basically told Jessica to go to hell this morning." "Not exactly, but close enough," Maya replied, unwrapping her sandwich with steady hands. She'd learned long ago that showing fear or uncertainty only encouraged predators to attack. "Do you have any idea what you've done? Jessica doesn't just let things like this go. She's going to make your life a living nightmare." Maya looked across the cafeteria to where Jessica sat with her usual crowd. The popular girl was animated, gesturing as she spoke to her friends, occasionally glancing in Maya's direction with a smile that held no warmth. She was going to do that anyway. At least now I don't have to pretend to be grateful for the abuse. But there are ways to handle Jessica, strategies that don't involve direct confrontation. You could have played along until you figured out how to navigate around her. "I've been playing along my whole life," Maya said quietly. "Moving from school to school, keeping my head down, avoiding conflict. Do you know what that gets you? It gets you 17 years of being pushed around by people who mistake kindness for weakness." Sarah studied her new friend with growing concern. "There's something different about you. Most kids would be terrified right now, but you seem almost calm." Before Maya could respond, a commotion erupted near the cafeteria entrance. Jessica and her entourage were walking toward their table, accompanied by several members of the football team. The quarterback, Jake Morrison, was a tall blonde with the kind of effortless confidence that came from a lifetime of being told he was special. Well, Jessica said as the group surrounded Maya and Sarah's table. "If it isn't our little rebel. I thought we should have a more formal introduction. Jake, meet Maya. Maya, meet Jake Morrison, starting quarterback and my boyfriend." Jake looked down at Maya with the casual arrogance of someone who'd never faced real consequences for his actions. "So you're the new girl who thinks she's too good to help with school activities. That's not very community-minded." "I helped this morning," Maya replied evenly. "I just declined to be voluntarily enslaved for future events." Several students at nearby tables had stopped eating to watch the confrontation. Maya could see phones being discreetly positioned to record whatever happened next. In the modern high school ecosystem, social destruction was often a public spectacle, documented and shared for maximum humiliation. "Enslaved?" Jessica laughed, but the sound was sharp and artificial. "That's a little dramatic, don't you think? We're just trying to help you understand how things work here. Integration into the social structure, you could call it. And what if I prefer staying outside your social structure?" Jake leaned down, placing his hands on the table and bringing his face closer to Maya's. "Then, you're going to find out that being an outsider here is a lot more unpleasant than you think. See, we have ways of making people feel welcome or unwelcome." Maya looked up at him without flinching, her dark eyes meeting his with steady calm. "Is that a threat?" "It's a friendly warning. From someone who knows how this place works." "I appreciate the warning," Maya said, her voice remaining level despite the tension crackling around the table. "But I think I'll take my chances." Jessica's smile became predatory. "Your chances? Oh, sweetie, you have no idea what chances you're taking. See, tomorrow night is the big homecoming dance. Jake here is not only the quarterback but also the homecoming king candidate. It would be really unfortunate if something happened to mess up such an important event." "What does that have to do with me?" "Well, there have been some concerns about security lately. Rumors of troublemakers who might try to disrupt things. If something were to happen, say, the fire alarm got pulled right in the middle of the king and queen crowning, well, everyone would need someone to blame." The implication was crystal clear, and Maya felt a familiar anger beginning to build in her chest. This wasn't just typical high school bullying anymore. Jessica was talking about framing her for something that could result in serious consequences: suspension, police involvement, permanent marks on her academic record. "That would be a shame," Maya said carefully.
Especially since I'm planning to be at home studying tomorrow night.
Plans change, Jake said with a shrug.
Funny how evidence has a way of pointing where it needs to point.
Sarah had been listening to this exchange with growing horror.
You can't be serious. You're talking about framing someone for something they didn't do. Jessica turned her attention to Sarah with the same predatory smile. Oh, look. The new girl has a little friend. How sweet. Sarah, I thought you learned your lesson freshman year about sticking your nose where it doesn't belong.
Leave her out of this, Maya said, her voice carrying a new edge that made several people step back unconsciously.
Or what? Jessica leaned forward, sensing that she'd found a pressure point. What exactly are you going to do about it? You're nobody here.
You have no friends, no influence, no protection. You're just a pathetic military brat who can't even afford decent clothes. The comment about being a military brat hit closer to home than Maya let show. Her father had taught her to be proud of their family's service, but he'd also warned her about people who would use that background against her. There were always those who resented military families, who saw them as outsiders or worse.
At least I know who I am, Maya replied quietly. I don't need to tear other people down to feel good about myself. Jake laughed harshly. Philosophy from the bargain bin.
That's rich. Let me explain reality to you, new girl. This is how the world works. There are people who matter and people who don't.
You're in the second category. And you think you're in the first? I know I am.
Star quarterback, full scholarship to state, girlfriend who'll be homecoming queen. Everything's lined up perfectly, and I'm not going to let some nobody with an attitude problem mess that up. Maya looked around the circle of faces surrounding her, Jessica's cruel satisfaction, Jake's arrogant confidence, the followers who enabled them through their silence and complicity. She thought about her father's lessons on leadership and character, about the men and women he served with who faced real dangers to protect others.
You know what I think? Maya said, standing up slowly.
At her full height, she was only slightly shorter than Jake, and something in her posture made him take an unconscious step backward.
I think you're scared. Scared? Of you? Jake's laughter was forced now. That's hilarious. Not of me specifically.
Scared that your perfect little world isn't as solid as you pretend. Scared that someone might come along who doesn't buy into your self-importance. Scared that maybe you're not as special as everyone tells you. The cafeteria had gone almost silent, with students from other tables openly staring at the confrontation. Fights were common enough, but this felt different, like watching someone step off a cliff without knowing how far they might fall. Jessica's face had gone pale with rage. You just made the biggest mistake of your pathetic little life. By Monday morning, everyone in this school is going to know exactly what kind of person you really are. And, when your reputation is in ruins and you're sitting alone every day, remember that you brought it on yourself.
My reputation is my own responsibility, Maya replied. Just like yours is yours. She picked up her backpack and walked toward the cafeteria exit, leaving Jake and Jessica standing by the table with their followers. The crowd parted to let her pass, students staring at her with a mixture of admiration and disbelief. Behind her, she could hear Jessica's voice rising as she began giving orders to her inner circle, planning whatever campaign of social warfare she had in mind. Maya's afternoon classes passed in a blur of whispered conversations and sideways glances. Teachers who normally wouldn't have paid much attention to a quiet new student seemed to watch her more carefully, as if expecting trouble to follow her into their classrooms. By the time the final bell rang, the story of the cafeteria confrontation had grown and mutated through countless retellings. As Maya walked to her car, she noticed Jake Morrison and several of his teammates near the student parking lot. They weren't directly blocking her path, but their presence felt intentional and threatening. Jake caught her eye and made a gesture across his throat, the universal sign for impending doom. Maya kept walking, her pace steady and unhurried. She'd learned from her father that showing fear or changing behavior in response to intimidation only encouraged further aggression. Better to maintain dignity and let potential enemies reveal their intentions through action rather than posturing.
the drive home gave her time to think about the situation she created. Part of her wondered if Sarah was right, if she should have found a more diplomatic way to handle Jessica's demands. But, another part, the part shaped by her father's values and her own experiences with bullies, knew that some lines couldn't be crossed without consequences. At home, Maya found another note from her mother about working late, along with leftover Chinese takeout in the refrigerator. She heated up the food and sat at the kitchen table with her homework, but found it difficult to concentrate on algebra and history when her mind kept returning to Jessica's threats. Around 8 o'clock, her cell phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Hope you're enjoying your last peaceful night. Tomorrow everything changes." Maya stared at the message for a long moment, then deleted it without responding. Engaging with anonymous threats would only encourage more of the same behavior. But the message confirmed what she'd already suspected: Jessica wasn't planning to let this conflict fade away on its own. She tried calling her father, but once again reached only his voicemail. The deployment was in its final months, but communication opportunities were irregular and depended on operational security requirements. Maya left a brief message saying she was doing well in school and missed him, carefully avoiding any mention of the social problems she was facing. That evening, Maya went through her usual workout routine in the garage, an hour of martial arts forms, strength training, and cardio that her father had designed to maintain peak physical condition. The familiar movements helped clear her mind and remind her of the capabilities she kept hidden beneath her unassuming exterior. As she moved through defensive combinations and offensive strikes, Maya thought about the various ways Jessica might try to follow through on her threats. Social media harassment was almost inevitable in the modern age: fake accounts, embarrassing photos, viral rumors designed to destroy someone's reputation. Academic sabotage was another possibility, with assignments mysteriously disappearing or false accusations of cheating. But the threat about the homecoming dance concerned her most. If Jessica was truly willing to frame her for disrupting the event, it could result in serious legal consequences that would follow Maya for years. College applications, job opportunities, military service, all could be affected by the kind of permanent record that came with criminal charges. The workout helped burn off some of her frustration and anxiety, but as Maya prepared for bed, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was standing at the edge of something much larger than a typical high school conflict. Jessica had the resources, motivation, and apparent lack of moral constraints to wage a sustained campaign of harassment and destruction. Maya's dreams that night were filled with images of previous schools and situations where she'd faced similar choices. In some scenarios, she fought back and won decisively. In others, she endured and survived through patience and strategy. But, in all of them, she was ultimately alone, relying on her own strength and judgment to navigate dangerous social waters. Friday morning arrived gray and overcast, matching Maya's mood as she drove to school. The parking lot seemed more crowded than usual, with clusters of students talking animatedly and pointing toward the main building. As Maya got closer, she could see why. Someone had covered her locker with crude graffiti overnight, words like loser and freak written in black marker, along with drawings that were clearly meant to be offensive. Students walking past pointed and whispered, some laughing while others looked uncomfortable with the public humiliation. Maya approached her locker calmly, examining the damage while mentally cataloging the effort required for the vandalism. Getting into the school after hours would have required either keys or knowledge of security vulnerabilities. The graffiti was extensive enough that it would have taken significant time to complete, suggesting multiple people or someone with considerable dedication to the project. "Looks like someone's not very popular," a voice said behind her. Maya turned to see Jake Morrison approaching with his usual confident swagger, followed by several teammates. "That's what happens when you don't know your place." "Did you do this?" Maya asked directly. Jake's smile was infuriating in its obvious insincerity. "Me? I was at home studying last night. Ask anyone on the team, we take our academic responsibilities very seriously." "I'm sure you do. But, vandalism is a serious problem at this school. Someone should really report this to the principal. Make sure there's an official record of the damage." The suggestion was clearly designed to force Maya into an uncomfortable position.
report the vandalism and appear weak, or ignore it and allow the harassment to escalate. Either choice played into Jessica's hands by establishing precedents for how she would respond to future attacks. "I'll think about it," Maya said, opening her locker and ignoring the graffiti. "You do that. And, while you're thinking, remember that this is just the beginning. Things are going to get a lot worse for you unless you learn some respect." Jake and his friends moved on, leaving Maya alone with her vandalized locker and a growing crowd of curious onlookers. She gathered her books for morning classes and closed the locker, noting that several students had taken photos of the graffiti with their phones. By lunchtime, the images would probably be circulating on social media with mocking captions and hashtags. Maya's first class was advanced biology, where Mr. Patterson was discussing cellular reproduction with his usual enthusiasm. She tried to focus on the lesson, but found herself thinking about reproduction in a different context, how toxic behavior spread through social systems like a virus, infecting susceptible individuals and creating larger patterns of abuse and complicity. During the break between classes, Sarah caught up with Maya in the hallway. "I saw your locker. This is getting out of hand. It's just vandalism. It can be cleaned off. It's not just vandalism, it's escalation. Jessica is testing how far she can push you before you break or fight back. And, either way, she wins." Maya appreciated Sarah's concern, but she was beginning to understand that her new friend still didn't grasp the full scope of what they were dealing with. Jessica wasn't just a mean girl with social power, she was someone willing to cross legal and ethical lines to maintain her position of dominance. "What would you do?" Maya asked. "I'd apologize. Publicly, in front of everyone. Tell Jessica you were wrong to challenge her, that you respect her position at the school, and that you'll stay out of her way from now on." "And then, what? Live the rest of high school as her personal servant, always looking over my shoulder, never knowing when the next attack is coming?" Sarah's expression was pained. "It's better than the alternative. Trust me, I've seen what happens when Jessica really decides to destroy someone. It's not pretty." The conversation was interrupted by the sound of commotion from down the hallway. A crowd had gathered near the main entrance, and Maya could hear raised voices and what sounded like security radios crackling. She and Sarah moved closer to investigate, joining the edge of the crowd that was watching whatever was happening. Through the gaps between students, Maya could see Jessica in the center of the disturbance, tearfully speaking to Principal Morgan and Officer Davis, the school's security guard. Her clothes were disheveled and her makeup was smeared as if she'd been crying for some time. "She threatened me," Jessica was saying, her voice carrying clearly across the hallway. "She said if I didn't leave her alone, she'd make me sorry. And then, she said something about her military background, about knowing how to fight." Maya's stomach dropped as she realized what was happening. Jessica was filing a formal complaint, creating an official record that would support whatever larger scheme she was planning. The tears and emotional distress were carefully calculated to generate sympathy and establish her credibility as a victim.